Well, it is always a great pleasure to be able to catch up with our good friend Ron Thomason of the legendary Dry Branch Fire Squad. Ron, it's great to have you on our show.
You are so good at that. I love that kind of talk.
Ron, we are always excited to work with you at the historic Gettysburg Blue Grass Festival. And I know, Ron, that you were among one of the very first bands to have played in Gettysburg. You've actually played at every festival there since 1979.
That's true. We started out, it's probably a little known fact that by this time, when Joe Cornett got to thinking about having a bluegrass festival, for some reason, somebody, and I think it might have been another person at the time, sent him over to talk to me, and we had the best talk. And it turned out I always loved talking to him to start with over all the years, but the one thing he was worried about was what happened if we have a bluegrass festival and some of the people that I picked don't get there. And I said, well, we'll just do their place too. And he said, okay, we got a job going now.
Not only did you solve Joe's problem, but you have maintained your presence at Gettysburg all these years. And it is always such a great festival to be a part of. So many outstanding artists and really just an outstanding atmosphere. And for you artists, it's always like a big reunion backstage, a lot of camaraderie there.
It is, and I just go ahead and say it right out. It's a big part of what you do too, because it just falls into place. And without that, it falls out of place. And I'm proud of what you actually do for people because you just keep it going.
And I appreciate that, my man. But I'll tell you, the Sunday morning set that you and the band do at Gettysburg is one of the things that I most look forward to at each festival. And I know I'm not alone because I know a lot of the festival attendees really look forward to that because it's such an inspirational way to start the day.
You know, you're really correct about that. And that's been one of the most wonderful parts of being at Gettysburg, because it could be rain or snow or sunshine or water. Everybody just comes and does it. We're part of it, but they're part of it too. And they've been part of it for so long. It just makes us feel good to be there with them. And I believe, and I probably shouldn't overstate this, I think they like being there with us.
And you come all the way from Colorado. I know there are many times, particularly at the Spring Festival in May, where you've actually still got snow on the ground up there on the mountaintop.
That's true. And sometimes it's down in the valley too, because I live just above the Arkansas River. Yeah, I always get on the plane and come out there. I wouldn't miss it for anything.
Ron, I want to talk a little bit about your history in bluegrass. You've got such a fascinating history in this music. I know you work with Ralph Stanley and the Clinch Mountain Boys. He was obviously very influential. What ultimately was it that was the catalyst to get you involved in music from the beginning?
Well, I've always loved the music. I remember the bluegrass music that my father played on his radio in 1949, 1950, after he got out of the Second World War. We didn't have electricity, so we listened to the battery in the car mostly, and I well remember that my favorite people to hear were the Stanley brothers. And at that time, Ralph Stanley had just gotten out of the war himself, and Carter Stanley had gotten out about a year before that. And so there was a big conglomeration of Bill Monroe, Stanley Brothers, and Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs, all at the same place in Bristol, Virginia, and we could get the radio real well. And as a child, I just loved it. I remember one time Bill Monroe came in and bought me a 5-cent Coke in one of the places just down the road from where I live. You know, I just never got over that. Finally got to college. I remember when I got out of college was the very week that Carter Stanley died. And those things just stayed with me always. And then Ralph Stanley came along and made me a Clinch Mountain Boy for a while. You know, he knew I wanted to be a school teacher, and so he just let me go in the nicest way. I have to say that we always stuck together, and even way now out here in Colorado, where I've gotten a festival started up that we've had for about 24 years now that does health care for children. The people around help us do the festival, and nobody gets paid except to perform at the festival. It's amazing that people just come in and do the work, make sure it gets done. And again, I had to say this for Ralph Stanley, when we first didn't know whether we could get that done, because a lot of people didn't want to do any work, but Ralph drove all the way out here 3 times and kind of gave us street cred. And now every year at the festival, it's for children's health care, and we've actually managed to get it dental and mental, and even this last year we're going to start getting dinner for them for students.
What an outstanding project, Ron.
That's a lot of stuff, isn't it? I'm sorry.
I'm glad you mentioned Ralph Stanley and the fact that you mentioned he drove out there. And you know, one of the things, Ron, I've always had so much respect for those early generation bluegrass performers like Ralph Stanley, like Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs and Bill Monroe. They traveled many times in station wagons, tied the upright bass on top of the station wagon. They didn't have the huge buses and things that a lot of the artists have today. So to get their music out, man, they really had some challenging times out on the road, because they were driving big station wagons and just, you know, putting the instruments in the car. Not too much leg room there, I wouldn't imagine.
Well, you're right, and I remember seeing that. And there was times when my father would take me out when I was still young, and Bill Monroe came to our little town there at Honaker, Virginia. Of course, the Stanleys did. They were just from over the mountain called Big A Mountain. Flatt and Scruggs were always down there at Bristol, and you're exactly right. They were big cars, and they packed them in as best they could, and how they ever did it. And the roads were bad. There weren't, you know, there weren't highways where they were doing this. And even Monroe, he was the only one coming back and forth from Nashville. So you're exactly right. How in the world they did it. They loved the music. They just stuck by it.
You know, years back before Charlie Louvin passed away, I had talked to great extent with Charlie, and he told me he and his brother Ira, they just loved Roy Acuff. And he said as kids, Roy came to a school near their house. He said they didn't have money to go to the show, but they went to the school and the windows were open, and they sat outside the windows and listened to Roy Acuff and the Smoky Mountain Boys. But he said the most interesting thing was to watch Roy pull up in the car that he was driving in. He said it was, as I recall, a Franklin air-cooled car.
I'll tell you something that'll really get you then. There came a time when we went to other countries. Dry Branch Fire Squad did. And one thing that happened several times was the people in India and Bangladesh and several of those countries that we went to had no money. They were very poor, and this was back probably just in, say, about the early 80s. And we had decided to do some of that work, and people would just hang on the windows outside. They'd raise ladders and stuff. It was just exactly like what was happening maybe 20 years before, when those people that were with the Grand Ole Opry were getting the same thing that we were getting 20 years later.
You know, when you perform at Gettysburg, you know, it seems like you include some humorous anecdotal stories. That always seems to go over big. Has that always been something that you've done with your performances?
Yeah, partially. I do that, but also I know it. Well, I know you because you've seen sometimes some of the things that I try to do for people, like the song "He's Coming to Us Dead." So many people have children that didn't get home from the war, and they'll just ask for that song, for instance, or another song like it, and I always do it, you know, if there's even 2 people. And I think it's so important, because then the other people in the audience that maybe just know what those other folks go through, and sometimes it breaks my heart, you know.
And the ham bone. Tell us about the ham bone. That's one of the things you're noted for.
You got a good memory. Now that I'm 80, I don't know how much longer I can do that, but people still want me to do it, and I just try my best to do it, and it gets done. And it's just rhythm. It's a thing that probably never would have come into bluegrass music, because the ham bone is kind of what you call downbeat. Any kind of music that you tap your foot to and it comes down. Bill Monroe is the guy that really did it. I don't think he meant to do it, but he's the first person that ever got that mandolin chop going with your foot up, and it was what the backbeat was. And within maybe a year of him and Flatt and Scruggs doing that, that's when rock and roll came into beat with that backbeat. Elvis and those people with the backbeat, not the downbeat, but the backbeat. I'll never get over. I was the one that got to put Bill Monroe in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I always try to encourage our listeners that if they've not been to a bluegrass festival, they need to do it, because it's such a great atmosphere. The long and short of it is it's just like not only a community of music lovers, but it just gives you a nice, warm, friendly feeling. And Ron, the thing that stands out the most to me is how personable the artists are. I mean, a lot of the new big country stars, rock and roll today, they come out, they don't meet and greet with the fans. It's really something special that bluegrass has to offer, that when you go to a festival or a bluegrass show, you can go and talk with that artist, you can get your picture taken, you can get an autograph, you can buy their CD. I think that means an awful lot to people.
Well, that's a big part of it, and that's one of the differences between country music, as it's called, and bluegrass music, as it's called. If I got time, I'd like to tell you a very recent story. For the last 24 years now, we've been doing our festival out here. Nobody gets paid except the artist. Everybody that wants a job can have a job. I'm there with them, because Heidi and I were ones that started this. It's all for children's health care, and over the years, we've actually added to where people you don't have to be a child. If you don't have money and you need care, we get it to them. But what happened this year was Rhonda Vincent came in, and she's a real big deal. I could never tell you how much she worked with the children, and we have a little group. Heidi does it generally, called the High Mountain Hayseed, and children from anywhere from 4 to maybe 14 or 16 get to be on the stage. They're the last people that play there, and we give them instruments and things like that, and their songs, and these are not wealthy people. When Rhonda came, she just got down off the stage and worked with the kids, and was like one of the people in the band. That is, I can't say any more about it. It's just wonderful. And she and other people, all the years we've done this, 24 years, they do that too. Now, not as much as she did, but they do that too. And that's what bluegrass music really stands for, I believe.
And this is your Great Fox Music Festival, correct?
Yep.
Well, one of these days I'm going to have to come out and visit your festival. It sounds like a wonderful festival. You have done so much for bluegrass music over the years. It's an honor for me to get to work with you and your band at Gettysburg every year. I always look forward to our sets together. It's just such a great experience. So, folks who've not been to Gettysburg, we'd like to invite them out to share a wonderful weekend of music with us. And it all kicks off next August 14th, runs through August 17th. The other thing about Gettysburg, Ron, is such a great family environment there. The campground there's something to do for everybody. And there's things for the kids to do. There's music for mom and dad to enjoy. And, that's the other thing that Rich and the festival have done, is creating that kids academy to get young people experiencing the love of playing music.
Oh, yeah. And you're a big part of that, Jim. Don't ever self-short on that.
Well, I appreciate that. And like I said, it's always a pleasure to work with you, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you soon. So safe travels to you and all the guys.
I appreciate you too, and thanks for calling in. And it's good to hear you talk, because it sounds just like you're at festival.
Sounds good, my man. Well, you have a wonderful day, and we'll catch up soon.